This is Troy Elder with Elder's Best Bakery again. This week we're going to be back with a recipe called pan integral or integral, I've heard some people say. It's basically just a sourdough wheat version. So it's a whole wheat version of sourdough. And again, as before, it's going to be using age-old recipe that's been around forever. And I decided I was going to go ahead and get it done tonight because I've got a lot of work to do at the bakery. And so that means I'm going to accelerate the process, and that requires a little bit of creativity, and I'm going to walk you through that. And hopefully this will all work out because I have to shoot this all in one take tonight, and hopefully everything will work out perfectly and I don't have to do any retakes because as you can imagine, starting this all over from scratch just to get one shot is a bit challenging. We'll be right back with the secret on how to speed up the process of making sourdough if you don't have all day or 3 days that it normally takes. We'll be right back. And here we have it. Here's the secret. I've already went ahead and mixed up the leaven for this particular recipe. Actually, I mixed up more than what I need because I'm making, I think, 4 of these. But anyway, in the recipe you'll see you need, for 1 loaf at least, I think it's 50 grams of white flour and 50 grams of whole wheat flour, and I don't know, 5 or 10 grams, 25 grams of a fresh starter, some kind of mother that you've had around, you know, just to seed the thing with or to inoculate it with. And then by putting it in my proofing oven, that will bring the temperature up, which I will be able to monitor on the side of the container there. And based on the temperature, that will accelerate the growth of the starter, just like it will the dough. So instead of it taking normal 3 days to make this bread like it would in a normal environment where you leave everything at room temperature, or you worry about what it's going to do today because it's hot outside or it's cold outside, you just control your own environment. And in this case, we're going to turn up the heat a little bit, and that means speeding up the whole process. So you can see I've marked it where it is now. That's after I just did up the premix, and then when it doubles in size, we'll be back. Hi, it's Troy Elder with Elder's Best Bakery, back with you guys. It's been a couple of hours while I'm waiting for this starter or leaven to ferment to the right point where I can start using it. It's not there yet. It's going to take a little while longer. But while I was waiting for that to happen, I was doing some research. So I thought I could explain to you guys a little bit about wheat flour and why wheat flour, it takes more water. If you were to compare this recipe to the recipe we did last week, you'll see I used, I think, 730 grams of water last week to 780 this week. And the short answer of it is that wheat bread absorbs more, or wheat flour absorbs more water than white flour does. And I mean, there's a variety of reasons for it. And essentially, there are like 3 components in wheat bran, and that's you get the shell that it comes in, and some of that makes it into the finished product, and that's called ash in the market or in the business. And that content makes a difference because that has a very high absorption rate. The name of them are pitazons, and pitazons are the shell or the ash, and they can absorb 15 times their weight in water. So the ash content is important. Then, of course, protein and lipids would be the thing. So you got starch, proteins, and fats, which is just like the macronutrients of the human body. We got our starches or our carbohydrates, we have our fats, and we have our proteins. And all 3 have different absorption rates. Well, fats don't absorb water whatsoever because fat and oil and water doesn't mix. And then, of course, with the starch, that depends on, of course, whether the starch is damaged or not. Which, you know, the miller has the ability to set these things in the factory to produce different blends, but you as a consumer really aren't going to have any control over whether or not, or even access to what percentage of this is damaged and on what is whole. So, but it really doesn't make that much difference with starch, because starch absorbs the water, but then it releases it. And it releases it back to the only thing left, which is the protein. So you will see protein content listed on your bread, and the higher the protein content of the bread that you're using, the more water it will absorb. And that is why you adjust your water ratios in your breads in order to get the same consistent product. So what took 730 grams to hydrate a sourdough white loaf at 73% hydration, it's going to take 780 grams of water at the same flour ratio to get the same consistency of dough in that finished product. And that's what you're looking for, is that consistency. Now, if you don't want to learn baker's math, you don't care about the baker's math, and you just want to follow recipes, that's fine. I highly encourage you to seek out recipes for baking in weight. You always want to do it by weight if you can. And if you really are that uncomfortable with metric, you can find them. Some of them have been converted into standard, but I'm telling you, once you get used to metric, you will not want to switch back. For example, I don't need to remember that 50 milliliters of water equals 50 grams, because it's always a 1-to-1. Milliliters and milligrams are the same, no matter what, and whether it's weight or by volume or whatever. But in standard, I mean, a quarter cup of water weighs how much? I don't know. And if it's something different than water, then it's the specific gravity of it is going to make a difference in how much it weighs. And it's just so much easier to know that in grams and milligrams, everything's the same. If it's 50 milligrams, it's 50 milliliters. If it's 100 grams, it's 100 milliliters. It's just that simple. There's no converting fractions or any of that stuff. So if you don't know the metric system, you don't really have to know it. Just follow the recipe and switch your scale over to the grams instead of ounces. That's all you have to do. And you definitely need a scale. You definitely need a home scale if you're going to bake and you expect to produce any type of consistent product out of your kitchen. Either you've gotten by without one all this time because you've been very lucky, or you follow a recipe to the letter and you live in a pretty stable environment where the humidity and the temperature in your house are always about the same every time. But if you want to bake on this level, you're going to need to purchase a scale. And with that said, we'll check back in a few more hours or maybe less to see when exactly this starter is going to reach its point and its optimal temperature. I've been running it at about 31 degrees Celsius, and I'm running the converter. Well, it's got a little handy dandy. I did get this today, folks, so I'm getting used to this as well, but it does have a little chart on here that'll tell me the temperature. And anyway, you can see here was the level when I started this right here, and we're up to here now. And of course, once it doubles in size, then I will be ready to use it. And it's maybe a quarter of that. So it's got a little ways to go. Once it doubles in size, then I can start using it. After it doubles in size, it will pass the so-called float test, which is simply when you pour this into water, you expect it to float on top of the water. If it sinks to the bottom, this was not ready. You started too soon. And essentially, we're repeating the same process. When I make this, I use equal parts flour and water to make this. When I turn this into a dough, all I'm doing really is reducing the amount of water to 73 or 78%, and instead of 100, and I'm just changing up the flours that I use. The recipe we're going to be making tonight has some rye flour in it, for example. So that's really what you do to change things up. And you can see that it's getting jiggly, and there are some bigger bubbles forming around the bottom. And this little level thing is really going to get on my nerves if it moves every time you touch it. But like I said, this is brand new, and I got tired of messing around with glass jars and with lips on them and everything. And this is just so simple. Now you do want this to breathe, and so I usually have the lid on it like this, when I'm actively producing a starter or a leaven. If this is a mother intended to be stored in the refrigerator and kept dormant until I'm ready to use it again, then I would seal it airtight. But while we're making a starter, we want air to get in there. We want bacteria and microorganisms inside the air to get into here and grow. And don't worry about whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, because when we bake the bread, we will kill every single organism. I promise. There'll be no living organisms once this puppy hits the oven. All right, so we'll be back as soon as this is ready to use, and we'll start mixing up some dough, and I'll give you the recipe for sourdough country whole wheat bread. I'll be right back. Hi, it's Troy Elder with Elder's Best Baking. Back with you. It's been another hour. We're making the wheat version of sourdough today, and I wanted to use temperature basically to show you how you can increase the speed of sourdough. Now, normally you would feed a starter or leaven like this the night before, and then in the morning when you got up, it would be doubled in size like it is now and ready for you to use. And you'll be able to tell that because it will be nice and bubbly. It'll have a smell to it. You'll see the bubbles. And plus, then the ultimate test that we do is always the float test. When I add the water and I pour the leaven in, the leaven will float. And you'll get to see that. But it's the first day with these new starter vessels, and I have to say I kind of like them. I checked the thermometer, the stick-on type that they give you two. I put one up top and one near the bottom so I could get a broader range of temperature readings, and it's accurate within 1 degree Celsius. So I compared it with the laser thermometer. So one of the two is 1 degree Celsius off either the laser thermometer or the cheapo little magnet type, and I'm gonna put money on the magnet one. The laser is probably accurate. So anyway, I do know that now. For this recipe, we are going to be doing basically the same thing we did the first time when we made the other sourdough. We're going to start out with what I've already pre-measured is 780 grams of water. And like I said before, this is a wheat bread. It requires more water or higher hydration than the white one did. The white loaf that I did was a 73% hydration. This one's going to be 78%. And now, once we got the 780 grams of starter, or water rather, we're going to go with our starter, and we want 210 grams of this. And there we go. You're off by a little bit, no big deal. Just a little bit, but you don't be off by too much because this is science. So, and I did not heat this water. I could have. That would speed the process up even faster. But I'm going to let this thing rest in between its stretch and fold. I'm going to let it rest in the proofing up. So that will bring the dough temperature back up to where I need it to give it that accelerated rise. Now, an accelerated rise is not something that you want to do at home, okay? I'm doing this so that I can produce this YouTube video and show you how to do this at home in a reasonable amount of time. I don't have 3 days to sit around and make YouTube videos. So I'm doing it in an accelerated fashion just for that reason. All right, so now we've got this leaven mixed up in our water here. And now it's time for us to add our dry ingredients. Now, I've already got them pre-weighed out here. We have 100 grams of rye flour. We're going to put in there 100 grams of all-purpose flour. And And then finally, 800 grams of wheat flour. And this is, all of these flours are all organic from our supplier that we use in the bakery to make the breads that we sell. Now, if you remember from last time, this part of the cycle is called the autolace, or you're just getting the bread wet. This is allowing the flour an opportunity to absorb all of this water that you put in here. And you want to mix this thoroughly, of course. And after it is mixed, we're going to let it sit for an hour, a good hour, before we even touch it, before we even put salt in it. We want this dough to have an hour for it to absorb its water, thoroughly absorb its water. Okay. Now you don't want to leave anything dry in this bowl at all when you finish. You want to have a shaggy but well incorporated dough. Alright. So we're almost done with that. Just going to make sure that all the bits are scraped off the bottom. We have nothing left. And that may look like a mess, but hey, it's not that big deal. It scrapes right off with your fingers, with your tool here, and what bits you can't get off, you just wash off. It's not that big of a deal. All right, now we will cover this up, and I'm gonna, like I said, put it back in my proofing oven to speed it up the process so we can get this video knocked out here. And then we'll be back after that to show you the stretch and fold, or the first of 3 stretch and folds that we're going to do to turn this shaggy mess that's looks like a big pile of whatever, but not dough at this point, into an actual smooth, silky dough that will be a delicious sourdough when we're done. So stay tuned. Okay, we are back after an hour autolace. The water has had a chance to absorb into the flour, and now we can add the salt. I mentioned this before, but when you're baking, salt interferes with the development of fermented doughs and also yeast doughs. I mean, it's something that I don't add until late, even when I'm making yeast dough. So anyway, this, some people leave these in the bowl, some people take them out of the bowl to do the stretch and folds. I like taking them out. I mean, that way I get a better feel for it all. And plus I'm sure that I get everything that's salvaged. That would be part of the bread. And water, of course, is the best thing to use when dealing with the dough at this stage, okay? You can see there how it feels, but we're just going to stretch this and fold this about, 12 to 16 times, just like with the white. And then we'll put it back in its bowl, the same bowl, and we'll let it rest for 2 more hours. And then it'll be our second stretch and fold. And then after that, we'll do a third stretch and fold an hour after. So it's, and that's my oven ready. I have some white bread, some white sourdough loaves that are going in there in a little while. But anyway, back to the stretch and folds. I do 3 of them over a 5-hour period. So do the first one, I do about 12 to 16. I mean, you can be a little bit more aggressive with this first one, and plus you want to get that salt incorporated. And then the second one, 2 hours later, I do about 4 to 6 turns. And then the last one, an hour after that, then another 4 to 6 turns, and then with an hour rest afterward. And then we'll do a pre-shape, which is just shaping it into a round ball, basically, giving it some tension. And then we'll do another rest for an hour, and then we'll do a final shape. And then that will rest for an hour. And then from there, it can be refrigerated overnight, which is something you do at home. So you'd start this, the next day you get up, after you fed your starter there, you get up and the starter's ready to go. So 8, 9 in the morning, you start making this. And then, at room temperature, you're gonna do these stretch and folds over a 5-hour period at room temperature, just like I'm doing. And then at the end, you can either bake it right then, or, actually no, you need to let it rest for a few hours and continue to rise a little bit. Now this dough is fermented and it's a living organism, so it will continue to rise until it runs out of food, basically. And when that happens, the bread's gone too far. You essentially overproofed your bread. So what we want to do is let it rest for a couple of hours before you bake it immediately. But most people just put it back in the refrigerator where it can sit at 34 degrees or below. It will sit for quite a while. I mean, days sometimes, and it will still come out fine because the growth of this type of bread stops. This fermentation stops at 34 degrees Fahrenheit. That is. So above 34 degrees, it's going to continue to ferment. And so if your fridge is running a little warm, it's going to continue to ferment overnight, and that's fine. It's just giving it more flavor. And the more time you can stretch this out, the more flavor it's going to have in the end. But you can, it's perfectly fine just to bake this a few hours or an hour even right after you're done. Like I said, it is a bell curve that climbs up. When the dough starts, it starts out at the bottom as it consumes its food and the water. It climbs up like a bell curve, and then eventually, if you refrigerate, the bell curve will stable out at the top and sort of flatten out. So it goes up and flattens out, and then it falls down. If you don't refrigerate it, it sort of goes up and right back down, just like a bell curve. Just like the bell curve. And you want to bake it when it's right near the top. That's when you want to stick it in the oven. It's that last little boost right there at the end, so that it reaches its peak in the oven, and that kills all the bacteria. And then from there, it cools off, and back you are with something delicious and good for you. So now cover this back up for 2 more hours, and then we'll do 4 stretch and folds after that, and cover it up for another hour, and do 4 more, and then I'll come back when it's time to pre-shape it. So 3 stretch and folds. The first one is an auto lace for an hour. You wait. Then you stretch and fold, wait 2 hours. The first stretch and fold, 12 to 16 times, working the salt, get it, into a shape. It doesn't need to be smooth or anything. It just needs to be, have the salt worked into it. You don't feel any dry lumps or anything. It's got a different feel to it now. 2 hours later, you come back and you do it 4 to 6 more times. You stretch and fold, rotating it 90 degrees each time. The second time, it will feel much different. Put that back away, covered up 2 more hours. Then the last time, you're going to do it 4 to 6 more times of stretch and fold, and it's going to feel extremely different. It's going to feel silky and smooth, and you're going to put that cover back on that towel on top for another hour. This last time is an hour, not 2 hours. You want 5 hours of stretch and fold, and then we'll do a pre-shape. An hour rest and a final shape, and at least an hour, but a few hours before you bake. But you want to let the final shape rest an hour before you put it in the fridge as well. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back for our second fold and turn. Dough's been resting for 2 hours. And I've got a little bit of water spread out here, but I'm gonna get a little more. I'll Turn this out real quick. Echo.
Your phone's on.
Stop. All right. And now, spare our hands. We clean hands, of course. And this time we're only going to do this 4 or 6 times. Just stretch it, fold it. Turn it 90 degrees. Stretch it and fold it. 90 degrees. Stretch it. Fold it. That's 4 and that's okay. But I'm just going to take this one and just do a roll up here. Like you can count that for 5 and 6. Okay. And now you can see that's starting to take more of a shape of a ball of dough. So now this will go back in the bowl here for 2 more hours, and then we'll do our 3rd folding turn. So check back with us shortly for fold 3. Okay, we are back after our stretch and folds. We did our 3 cycles of stretch and folds. The first, we stretched and folded 12 to 16 times and let it rest for 2 hours. The second one was 4 to 6 times, let it rest for 2 more hours. And the last one was another 4 to 6 times with a final 1 hour rest. Then after that, it's ready to do what's called pre-shaping, in which we switch from flour or from water over to flour here for your pre-shaping. And I did mention this earlier, but this is a double loaf recipe, or in my case, it's going to be 4 loaves, because this is done in kilos or in grams, and it's running at 4.4 pounds nearly. So a pound each is plenty, but you can bake it off just like this, but this would be really long bake, or you can cut it in half like this and follow a normal bake time of 20 minutes in steam, 15 to 20 minutes without steam at 450. But like I said, we're gonna cut these in half twice or in quarters. And if you notice, I switched bitch tools to the larger scraping tool. And when you're pre-shaping, you're making a round shape. Basically, that's all you're doing, okay? Same thing with your hands, a little flour. But the pre-shaping, you just stretch and fold into the center, stretch and fold into the center. You don't want to deflate it, you want to be kind of gentle with it, but you're just taking it, making it into a ball shape. Try not to press out any air, you're not punching it down. And you want to seal up the bottom as best you can. All right, and we'll let that rest there. And then again, just for demonstration, we're going to fold it in, and just keep folding it in. A little too much flour on the board, but it's okay. Just fold it in, and seal the bottom. And we got 2 pre-shaped. We'll go ahead with 3 and 4 here. Now, after these have pre-shaped into this round shape, we'll let them rest for another hour. And then we'll do their final shaping. And today I'm going to be doing 2 boule and 2 batard. And that's basically just round and elongated. And like I said, they're about 500 grams each when they're wet. And then of course when they dry out. Or when they cook, they dry out. And usually they weigh about 450 or so. They lose about 50 grams. That all depends on how long you cook it and how much moisture you cook out of it. But you're starting with 4 pounds, 4.4 pounds to be exact, or 2 kilos of ingredients. And this is it. These are pre-shaped now. I will take a pastry cloth or a cloak. I use for, I use these for baguettes a lot, but I just like to use it to cover up bread here at home. And those will sit there like this for 4 hours. And then after, for 4 hours, listen to me, for 1 hour, the 4 of them will sit here, and then I will shape them into their final shapes. And when I come back, you'll get to see how that's done. We'll do a batard and boule just like we did last time, and then they'll rest for an hour. And then I'll check their temperature and their time and see how long it takes before I need to bake them off. Be right back. Okay, we are back, and it is now time to shape these bad boys into their final shapes that we're going to use. And as you've seen, I've chosen 2 different shapes again. I'm going to use the boule and batard, and these are going to be the 500 gram sizes. So we're just going to shape them, and then I put them in this. This is the secret here. This is rice flour. Once we shape them and dust them in this and then put them in their baskets, despite, I just dusted the inside of this basket with some flour, with some wheat flour actually, just for looks. It serves no other purpose. But the rice flour will keep it from sticking to the inside of this basket. I mean, it will not stick. It's absolutely magic. I love it. But in any case, these smaller ones, these round smaller ones, are going to stay the shape they are. It's just, I'm going to shape them one last time and then put them in their basket. Again, try not to squeeze any of the air out. Just gently want to fold it around until I get a nice seal all the way around. And then once I've done that, I can come back and just, like I said, we just dip this in here and just roll it around gently and dust it off. We don't want a lot on there, not much at all, as a matter of fact. And I'm just going to put this in here. I want the seam up, and if there's any parts of the seam that are still opened up that you see, you just go ahead and close them. And then we'll cover that and then let it rise again. And then once it's risen again, and it's in its time period that it needs to be, that we talked about earlier, at the nearing the peak of the bell curve, then we'll just go ahead and bake it and finish it off. But if I want to keep it till later, I can put it in a refrigerator that's 34 degrees or colder, and it will stop right where it is. But I still wouldn't want to leave it too long. I mean, a couple of days maybe, but not any longer than that. Or if it's a couple of degrees above 34, or just 1 degree, it'll continue to ferment. So that means it's going to continue to proceed up that bell curve, and it will reach a point where it will overproof. All this does is just buys you more time. Okay, so this one we'll go ahead and make into the other shape. Batard, and it's just a little bit different. It's just a stitching pattern. Start from one side and pull over, kind of like a stitch, and then you just pull out and pull back. Pull out, pull back. Same thing over and over, over and over, and then just chuck this in a little bit. Squeeze it all off. Gently coat it. Into the basket, seam side down. Just gentle with it, and again, squeeze off any place that looks like it's gonna break open or not seal enough. You want a good seal, like a balloon, so it can build up air pressure. And that's exactly what it will do, is it will off gas and build up some pressure. It's not gonna grow a bunch, but it'll do its biggest spring actually in the oven is when that will happen. So look for that to happen in the oven. I'll show you later the little test you can do to make sure that it's ready to go in the oven. just by pressing on it, touching on it. If you want a little bounce back, but I'll demonstrate that later. All right, and this one, and this one more here, into a petard. Everybody's got their own little technique. Everybody does things a little bit differently. Mine tend to end up looking a little bigger on one side than the other, so just fix that here. Last light little coating into the basket. The seam facing up again, always seam facing up. Press in just like you would some wonton rolls or pasta or whatever. Just press it together really tightly in any place where it's opened up and left a gap. And then we will just cover these up and let them rest. And when we're ready, we will get an oven good and hot, pop them out of the baskets, score them, and pop them in their vessels to bake. And we'll see you guys back here when that happens. Okay, we're back, and it's been enough time. We got the dough out on the cutouts that I make out of the parchment paper. No point in buying those expensive things online that cost all that extra money, and you can't get any good use out of them really. It's just the lifting the dough, and you can use this for the same thing, and it's a lot cheaper. And you can even reuse these. I've reused them before. I mean, as long as they're still in good shape, it's gonna be fine. But I wanted to do this again so you can see this cut. People struggle with this and struggle with it. But again, you want the razor blade or the lom. This tool is called. Some people hold just the razor blade. They make these in round shape with the razor blade sticking out just the round piece of it so you can cut. It's really personal preference. But you want to hold this at a 20 degree angle this way. So we're going up 20 degrees. And then we're going to pull from here, from end to end, in one swift cut, okay? It's just going to go up and then straight down, like that. And then for the round ones, I do it 4 times, if you remember. And it's the same process. 20 degrees, straight cut. Turn it, 20 degrees, straight cut. And again. And again, okay? And now when the oven gets preheated, which it almost is right now, we'll be back tossing in the oven. Well, actually, I'm just going to toss them in the oven. You saw that before. Put them in their cooking vessels, in this case, Dutch ovens. I've got 2 different shapes, one for each, and we'll put those in there with a little bit of ice that I have. That'll create this extra steam that I need to get that lift and that nice ear development and that you expect from a good sourdough bread. And then we'll bake the other 2 off and par bake the other 2 actually. Just bake them for the first 20 minutes in their vessels. And then we'll finish them off at 450 degrees for another 15 to 20 minutes. Just depends on the color. How dark do you like it? I mean, like I said before, once these breads are done, they kind of hit 100 or 210 degrees and they just hang out there unless you burn them. So it's really a question of how dark do you like your bread, okay? So we'll see what these things look like when they come out of the oven. Okay, we are back, and we've got some final product here, and whole wheat final product turns out looking like this. This is the color I like it. I cooked these 2 all the way through to completion, but I stopped these 2 after their vessels, and mainly because I wanted to show you something, and that is that even if these are, these can be frozen once they're fully cooked and stored up to 6 months, and they'll be just fine when you thaw them out. You can also stop them right here, and this is called par baking. And if you pull them here and then double wrap them and freeze them, you can pull them out later and thaw them at room temperature, and then pop them back in a 450-degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll end up with this, but it'll taste fresh baked and it will be hot. Now, again, never encourage cutting into hot bread unless you intend on eating every piece of it right then. Cutting into the hot bread will immediately let all of the moisture escape, and the bread will be dry and stale and not very palatable. And so that's it for this week's country whole wheat sourdough edition, or pan integral. Now next week I decided we're going to do one more bread, and it's going to be the Pullman loaf pan. Now I'm going to make a pan de mie, which is just white, classic sandwich white bread. And it's an enriched dough. It uses regular yeast, so there's no sourdough involved. And this will be like I make this at home all the time, just for us to have for normal everyday bread in place of whatever your favorite home sliced bread is you buy at the grocery store. And it's just as good. It's better for you. And next week we'll be going over how to do this at home. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Please click like and subscribe to this channel for updates, and we'll see you guys next week when we'll tackle good old sandwich bread.